we always see franchisees grow through, you hit those, 10 locations, 50, 100. If you're lucky enough, 150, 200. Um, you were responsible and part of the group that was growing Snap here in Australia. Like, did you feel any additional pressure at any certain size? Was there any, like, a tipping point in terms of as you grew the franchise through your franchise sales, you contributed to it, and then ultimately running it? Is there a magic number that you need, as a franchise brand, you gotta be aware of that things can start unraveling a little bit?
Yeah, let me take this a couple of different directions because I've seen what tends to happen here. Well, let's wind back to Leon and Darren, who took the original master license for Australia and New Zealand.
Yep.
I think because they're also laser focused on a country or a couple
Mm,
of countries, and they had a lot of contacts, and they invested their hard earned into company owned stores as well.
mm,
So it wasn't like they just took the master and said, "Oh, let's go and sell the product to others."
yeah.
They got right behind it, and so that built a lot of confidence with people, and so the brand
Mm,
grew quite quickly. I think the other thing for them is because they had the company-owned stores, the revenue coming in from those company-owned stores supported the master franchise structure to support the
mm,
other franchisees. Part of the challenge that some franchisors have is that they'll open 1 or 2 locations, and then they'll try and franchise their business. And a lot of people think that franchising, you can make a bucket load of money, right? But the reality is you're probably underwater until you get to at least 20 odd locations. Then you might start making a little bit of money. But the reality is most franchisors aren't making really good money until probably 50, 60 locations. And to get to 50 or 60 locations, I mean, we're talking, I don't know what the percentage is of franchisors that get to that number, but
mate,
it's very low.
has to be.
And so you think about that. If you don't have the company owned stores in themselves,
Mm,
then going into franchising is probably just hold off a little bit.
yeah.
The other mistake that I tend to see a lot is franchisors will get really excited. They'll get to 50, 60, maybe even 100 locations here in Australia, and then they'll go, let's go international.
Mm,
And okay, you've just started making money in Australia. You're now going to try and go international, which is going to need a huge amount of money,
yeah.
time, resource, distraction, everything else. To why? When there's still potentially growth opportunity to go to 2, 3, 4, 500 locations in Australia. Sometimes I just say, "Just hold off for a minute,
Mm,
okay? Learn more, get more money in the bank, be in a better position to tackle those next
yeah.
targets." Um, and sometimes that's just a piece, as a franchisor, you get too excited. I want to go international. I want to grow. I want to go to the US. And,
Yeah, yeah.
and, someone comes to you and says, I want to buy a master franchise license. And I've only learned this through experience because, as I came into Lift Brand, in particular into the global CEO role, I've closed Egypt, I've closed India, I've closed Mexico. We've closed a number of different countries where
Mhm.
some of these were our very early master franchisors in the Snap Fitness brand.
Yeah.
But I looked at it and said, why? It's a vanity project to have these countries. We're making no money out of. We've got 25 clubs in Mexico. We make nothing out of it. I mean,
Mm,
it's just not
mm,
worth us being there. So, sometimes the headache of these things is just not worth the vanity of doing it.
yeah.
I think from a franchise growth perspective, focus on. It's like the franchisee. Why do I like a franchisee to only have 3 or 5 locations in their backyard? Because I know if they're close to them, they're going to work hard and they're going to more than likely have great performance out of those clubs.
Yep.
But when you start buying clubs, you start in Brisbane, you got 3 or 4 clubs there, and you go and buy something in Melbourne or Adelaide or Perth, it's not like an investment property where
Mm,
you don't necessarily need to be there. You've got to have tabs on this thing.
yeah.
It's the same deal with a master franchisor or a franchisor who then wants to go international.
They do get a bit excited when they hit the 5, 10. They pull that trigger very early. I wonder how many franchise brands have done that and failed. James, you wanna pull that up for us, mate? No, so we get that line in.
You're not Joe Rogan, mate.
Not you. Who knows, mate? Who knows? Who knows? So back to you with franchise sales, we sort of left off there. I think that, as I was saying, and I do respect that role because it is you're dealing with a lot more money. There's a lot more restrictions to get people in the door, to get them from the inquiry through to the close, finding the right territory they're talking about that suits them, and lining all that sort of stuff up. And also meeting expectations of the company as well, making sure you're hitting targets and that sort of stuff. Can you talk a bit about, in franchise sales and those early days, maybe what shocked you or what you just, from an administration perspective, I think you touched on earlier that you'd be hitting your strides in that. Was there anything that sort of shocked you that you didn't, that you didn't expect to be there?
I'm not sure if anything really shocked me. Well, even the early days for me in the franchise sales space, what I was quite surprised with was even in Snap Fitness, there wasn't much of a structure.
Mm.
And at that time, I came in and there was 180 odd locations, or maybe it was a bit more than that.
Yep.
And so the brand had grown pretty significantly without great structures in place. And so I think putting those structures in place really helped us vet the right franchisees and go through that process. But there was already some good interest in the brand, especially from existing franchisees.
Yeah.
The one thing I found, and the great thing I guess I found, was that this is an industry and a space where people are passionate. They come out of corporate executive type jobs and go,
Yeah.
what do I love? Well, I love health and wellness. I love going to the gym myself. Is this a good product to invest in? And so that the type of people quite often that I was talking to were people that were passionate about health and fitness. And
Mm.
so that made it a little bit easier. Certainly as we've continued to grow and finding further franchisees, a lot of our franchisees now come from other experiences as well, whether they've got sort of QSR, quick service restaurant type franchises and things like that. And so they've already got some franchising experience, which is also really helpful. So, look, I don't think anything really surprised or shocked me. Fortunately, this is a space that people are really passionate about.
Yeah.
And when you're able to mix that passion, sometimes they're not as concerned about the returns, but fortunately we have tremendous returns as well. So it becomes a much easier product to sell.